Welcome to the Right News Network.
Welcome to your World News Update. I'm Emma, bringing you today's top stories from around the globe. Tensions in the Persian Gulf have erupted into open military conflict as Iran launches coordinated attacks on the UAE and shipping traffic in one of the world's most critical waterways. Our Middle East correspondent Layla Nazari has this story. Layla?
That's right, Emma. What we're seeing right now is Iran firing drones and missiles at the United Arab Emirates and tankers moving through the Strait of Hormuz. The UAE military says they intercepted 3 missiles over their territory, but a drone got through and hit the Fujairah oil port. That's a major facility beyond the strait. There's also reports of an ADNOC-linked ship being struck in the waterway itself. All of this happened just hours after President Trump announced this new military operation called Project Freedom, which is basically designed to help American ships navigate through the strait and break what Iran's been doing to block it.
Did the U.S. military engage with Iranian forces?
Well, absolutely. U.S. Central Command says their destroyers fired on and sank 7 Iranian boats that were trying to interfere with these convoy operations. The Americans are saying Iran launched cruise missiles and drones at their ships, though Washington denies Tehran's claim that they actually hit anything. You've got both sides throwing competing narratives out there right now, but what's clear is we've gone from posturing to actual military exchanges in the strait.
What does this mean for the broader region?
Look, this is serious because the Strait of Hormuz handles about 1/3 of all global maritime oil trade. If this keeps escalating, you're looking at energy prices spiking, insurance costs jumping through the roof, and real economic pain across Europe, Asia, and the U.S. The good news is we're already seeing Saudi Arabia and Qatar condemning Iran's attacks and rallying behind the UAE, which isolates Tehran diplomatically. But unless someone finds an off-ramp here, I think we're heading towards sustained military operations, not just one-day flare-ups.
Layla Nazari in the region. Thank you. Still on the world, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most critical energy choke points, and today it became a flashpoint between the U.S. and Iran. Layla is still with us. Layla, what is the latest?
Well, Emma, we're seeing this really tense moment unfold. The U.S. military moved in on Monday to try and get those hundreds of stranded commercial ships through the strait, right? And Iran responded with what they're calling warning shots, missiles and drones targeting the UAE. The Americans fired back, sank 6 Iranian fast boats. So you've got this 4-week-old ceasefire that's suddenly hanging by a thread.
Did President Trump say whether this crosses any lines for him?
Look, here's the thing. Trump told ABC News it was not heavy firing, which is interesting phrasing, right? He's not declaring it a ceasefire violation, but he's also warning Iran that they'd better hope the truce holds. So there's this diplomatic wiggle room right now, but it's shrinking fast.
Layla, appreciate it. Continuing on this developing story, the Supreme Court's decision affects access to one of the most consequential medications in America right now. Our technology correspondent Alex Park has more on how this ruling impacts the systems delivering these prescriptions. Alex?
Well, Emma, what's interesting is that the lower court ruling would have essentially forced the entire mifepristone distribution system back into brick-and-mortar clinics. Right now, patients can get prescriptions through telehealth visits and have the pills mailed directly to them. The Supreme Court's stay keeps that system running for at least a week while they figure out what happens next. It's a pretty significant technical and logistical issue. If they'd shut down mail access, you're talking about massive disruption to how reproductive healthcare reaches people, especially in rural areas.
So what does this temporary pause actually tell us about where the court's heading on the bigger question?
Look, I think the fact that they issued this stay without full briefing suggests they're taking seriously the arguments that completely shutting down mail access could cause irreparable harm. The stay buys them time to think through the regulatory questions and the precedent they'd set if they start overriding FDA drug approval decisions based on state lawsuits. Here's the thing. This isn't just about abortion anymore. It's about whether courts can override federal pharmaceutical authority on a whim.
Alex, appreciate the insight on that. Across the Middle East, ceasefires are crumbling as Israeli military operations intensify dramatically. Lebanese health authorities say 77 people have been killed in strikes on southern Lebanon since Thursday, with additional casualties reported in Gaza. Without immediate diplomatic intervention, analysts warn the region faces a dangerous spiral toward wider conflict. Remaining with the White House, there's growing scrutiny over how the administration handles both security threats and emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. Our Washington correspondent Marcus Webb has more on what happened Monday. Marcus?
Well, Emma, a plainclothes Secret Service officer opened fire on a suspicious individual near the White House Monday after spotting what looked like a firearm. The incident forced a brief lockdown of the complex near the Washington Monument. USSS Deputy Director Matt Quinn confirmed the exchange of gunfire, but we don't have details yet on whether anyone was seriously injured or the suspect's current condition.
What's drawing criticism from Democrats right now?
Look, California Governor Gavin Newsom is accusing the Trump administration of exploiting this shooting incident to push political priorities instead of actually addressing the security vulnerabilities that allowed it to happen. I mean, the timing is significant because we're also seeing the White House reverse course on AI regulation. They're now discussing vetting AI models before release, which is a pretty dramatic shift from their earlier hands-off approach to tech.
Marcus, appreciate it. Ukraine's rejecting a Russian ceasefire offer as both sides claim they're the ones serious about peace. But the real story emerging from this conflict is the environmental disaster unfolding across Russia's Black Sea region. Marcus is still with us. Marcus, what's the latest on the ground?
Well, Emma, what we're seeing here is Russia announced this May 9th ceasefire proposal, right? Tied to their Victory Day commemoration. But Ukraine's essentially said no thanks. They're not buying it. And honestly, the reason's pretty clear. Kyiv believes Moscow's just using it as a PR move while they're still trying to take more territory. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drones keep hammering Russian oil facilities, and that's where things get really serious. Residents in Tuapse, down on the Black Sea, they're reporting this toxic black rain, actually black rain, falling after these strikes. That's not just a military problem anymore. That's a humanitarian crisis.
So the environmental damage is becoming as consequential as the military campaign itself.
I mean, look, it potentially is. You've got Russian officials apparently downplaying or covering up what locals are saying is a massive environmental disaster. When you destroy oil infrastructure at this scale, you're not just affecting the war effort, you're poisoning the air and water for civilians on both sides of the border. This isn't something that gets fixed when a ceasefire happens. This is generational damage we're talking about.
Marcus, appreciate the reporting on this one. Moving to the markets now, oil prices are climbing on renewed Middle East tensions between the U.S. and Iran. Our finance editor, Sophia Reeves, is tracking the story. Sophia?
Well, Emma, we're seeing crude hold onto solid gains after some pretty serious developments in the Persian Gulf. You've got U.S. and Iranian forces exchanging fire, tankers under attack. And that's rattling energy traders because roughly 21 million barrels move through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. When that corridor gets threatened, oil prices don't stay flat.
How much is crude actually moving on these headlines?
Look, we're talking meaningful swings here. The market's pricing in real supply risk now, not just speculation. What's interesting is insurance costs for shipping are spiking too. Companies operating in the Gulf are paying way more to move product through contested waters. If this tension holds, we could see sustained price pressure.
Sophia, appreciate the color on this. Prime Minister Modi's party has achieved a major political victory in West Bengal, one of India's most fiercely contested states, and it could have major implications for Indian politics broadly. Our Asia correspondent James Chen has this. James?
Thanks, Emma. Well, this is really significant. The BJP is leading in 176 out of 294 seats in West Bengal, according to election trends, and that's a massive breakthrough for Modi's party. This state has been a stronghold for regional and communist parties for decades, so to see the BJP dominant here is honestly a pretty historic shift in Indian politics.
What does this win mean for Modi's political standing right now?
I mean, it's huge for him. He's midway through his third term, and winning control of one of India's most competitive states sends a real message about the party's strength and reach. What's interesting is that this opens doors for the BJP in eastern India, a region they've historically struggled in. And politically, it gives Modi momentum heading into what could be challenging years ahead.
James, appreciate the context. Moving to us now, a major development in a case that's raised serious questions about press freedom and international relations. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich has appealed his arrest in Russia after being detained on espionage charges he denies. Watch for how the U.S. government responds and whether this case affects how American journalists can operate overseas. Global shipping routes are facing unprecedented disruption as the Strait of Hormuz effectively shuts down amid mounting regional tensions. Mediterranean Shipping Company has now opened an alternative trade route to keep goods moving, but the freeze is already threatening oil prices and supply chains worldwide. Watch to see whether diplomatic efforts can reopen this critical waterway or if shipping companies permanently reshape global commerce routes. Now, our in-depth analysis of the day. The story dominating the headlines, examined from every angle. Iranian cruise missiles striking U.S. Navy ships, drones setting the Fujairah oil zone on fire, Dubai residents taking shelter as intercept explosions echo over the city. Tonight, the Strait of Hormuz isn't just a choke point on a map, it's a war zone. And the ceasefire that was supposed to have stabilized this region has collapsed in the most dramatic and dangerous fashion imaginable. 7 Iranian boats sit at the bottom of the Gulf. CENTCOM is calling it Iranian-initiated aggression. Tehran is claiming it hit a U.S. frigate, a claim Washington flatly denies. Joining me now are Marcus Webb, our defense and security analyst, and Sophia Reeves, our economics and markets editor. Marcus, let me start with you. Is this the moment the United States has been dreading, or the moment it's been waiting for?
Thanks, Emma. Look, let's be clear about what happened today. Iran fired cruise missiles at the United States Navy, not at a proxy, not at a commercial vessel they can later claim was ambiguous, at the United States Navy. And the response, sinking 7 Iranian boats, while satisfying, is not yet sufficient to change the regime's strategic calculation. What we saw today was a regime testing the outer limits of American resolve under Project Freedom, and what Tehran needs to understand, urgently, is that there are no outer limits when you fire on American warships. Admiral Brad Cooper at CENTCOM called this exactly what it is, Iran initiating aggressive behavior. The Daily Wire's analysis is right on the money. Behavior in Tehran only changes when the regime changes or faces genuine existential threat. The Arab world gets it. MBS called the UAE within hours to condemn the attacks. Qatar's emir did the same. Even Iran's neighbors are closing ranks against it. The question isn't whether America should respond with overwhelming force. It's whether Washington has the stomach to see this through to an outcome that actually sticks.
But Marcus, devil's advocate, Iran is claiming it struck a U.S. frigate, that the ship turned back and fled. Even if that's disinformation, which CENTCOM says it is, doesn't the propaganda war matter here? Doesn't Iran win something just by having this argument publicly? And Sophia, I want to bring you in, because the markets are watching every one of these developments. What is the economic reality of what happened today?
Well, look, Marcus is right that Iran needs to feel pain. But here's what I think Marcus is missing. The economic dimension of this crisis is being catastrophically underestimated. 20% of the world's oil supply moves through that strait. 20%. And Fujairah, the port that's burning tonight, was specifically designed as the bypass route if the strait gets blocked. Iran didn't just attack a military target, it attacked the redundancy built into the global energy system. Brent crude will spike on open tomorrow, and if this drags on for weeks, we're not talking about a few dollars at the pump. We're talking about an inflationary shock that hits every economy on Earth. The free market case for resolving this swiftly and decisively is overwhelming. Every day of uncertainty is a tax on global trade that ordinary people pay. The longer Washington allows this to fester with graduated responses and managed escalation, the more economic damage accumulates. I want a strong American response. I just want it fast, because the market can't absorb prolonged ambiguity.
I hear what Sophia is saying, but with respect, that misses the point entirely. Speed without decisive force isn't a solution. It's a ceasefire sequel. We've already been through that movie. The first ceasefire collapsed. A second one will collapse faster if it isn't backed by consequences Iran genuinely fears. And on the propaganda war, Emma, absolutely it matters. But here's the thing. Iran's claim that they hit a U.S. frigate and it fled was denied within hours by CENTCOM. The regime is lying for domestic consumption. We've seen this playbook since 1979. What destroys that propaganda is not better messaging, it's winning. 7 Iranian boats at the bottom of the Gulf is a message. The question is whether it's the first sentence or the last sentence in this chapter. I'll tell you what keeps me up at night. The moment Washington blinks, the moment there's any signal of hesitation, every Iranian-backed proxy from Baghdad to Beirut reads it as an invitation.
Here's what I want to know, and I want both of you on this. We've got MBS condemning the attacks, Qatar's emir condemning the attacks, the entire Gulf closing ranks against Tehran. Does that regional coalition actually change the strategic picture? And where does this go from here? Sophia, where do you see this playing out?
The way I see this playing out, that Gulf coalition is enormously significant, but also fragile. Saudi Arabia and Qatar are condemning Iran loudly right now, but both of them have economic exposure, and both of them have back channels to Tehran. The real test isn't whether MBS makes a phone call. It's whether he's prepared to deepen economic and military coordination with the U.S. to sustain this pressure campaign. If current trends continue and the United States maintains Project Freedom with credible force, Iran's oil sector, already under immense pressure from the blockade, faces a slow-motion collapse. The Daily Wire's reporting on this is right. Iran is being forced into increasingly risky moves because it's economically desperate. Desperate regimes either capitulate or double down. Right now, Tehran is doubling down. The risk is that they calculate one dramatic strike might fracture Western resolve enough to get relief. That calculation must be proved catastrophically wrong.
Here's what concerns me most, and this is the scenario I don't think enough people are gaming out. Iran doesn't have to win militarily to win strategically. If it can drag this into a prolonged, grinding, low-intensity conflict that keeps oil prices elevated, strains the U.S. Navy's operational tempo, and chips away at Allied patience, it achieves a kind of negative victory. The regime has survived 40 years by making confrontation feel more costly to its adversaries than to itself. History tells us that the one thing that reliably ended Iranian aggression in the past, Operation Praying Mantis in 1988, when the U.S. destroyed half their naval force in a single day, was speed, scale, and overwhelming decisive force. Not graduated, not proportional, overwhelming. The trajectory right now suggests we're still in graduated mode, and graduated isn't going to be enough.
Marcus Webb, Sophia Reeves, 2 sharp minds, 1 burning conclusion. The Strait of Hormuz is on fire, the ceasefire is in the bin, and somewhere in Tehran tonight, someone just found out that sinking 7 of your boats and setting your disinformation on fire is only the beginning. We'll be watching. The Strait of Hormuz is on fire, literally. U.S. Navy vessels sank 6 Iranian fast boats. The UAE was struck by Iranian missiles and drones for the first time since a ceasefire was declared just 4 weeks ago. 2 cargo ships are ablaze off the UAE coast, and oil has surged to $115 a barrel. President Trump, when asked if Iran violated the ceasefire, said, and I want to make sure everyone hears this, it was not heavy firing. Not heavy firing. The United Arab Emirates might beg to differ. Joining me now are Sophia Reeves, our economics and markets editor, and James Chen, our geopolitical analyst. Sophia, let me start with you. Is this ceasefire already dead, and did the Trump administration just blink?
Thanks, Emma. Look, let's be honest about what happened on Monday. Iran fired missiles and drones at a U.S. partner state. It engaged American naval forces in a waterway that carries 20% of the world's oil. The U.S. Navy sank 6 Iranian boats. Good, that's the right call. But then the President of the United States goes on ABC News and essentially says, well, it wasn't that bad. Douglas Murray has warned for years that the single greatest gift the West keeps giving Iran is ambiguity about consequences, and Trump just handed Tehran a brand new one. I understand the instinct to preserve the ceasefire diplomatically, I genuinely do. But here's what Tehran heard on Monday. You can fire on our partners, you can engage our naval forces, and the American president will call it not heavy. That is not deterrence. That is an invitation.
But Sophia, isn't there an argument, and I suspect James might make it, that Trump is playing a longer game here? That going nuclear in the rhetoric, no pun intended, when you're trying to preserve some form of diplomatic process, could blow up the entire framework. And James, what's your take on this?
Well, look, here's what I think Sophia is missing. She's absolutely right on the strategic logic, but the economic reality of Monday cannot be understated. Oil at $115 a barrel, treasuries selling off simultaneously. That's a market signal that says the global economy is genuinely frightened. Now, I'm not saying that changes the strategic calculus on how to handle Iran. It doesn't. But Trump is navigating a situation where re-engaging full military operations means oil potentially at $140, $150, with inflation already a political liability. The Economist made the point that Trump probably can't reopen Hormuz cleanly and deal with the uranium issue simultaneously. Those are two enormous strategic problems compounding each other. And the data suggests the administration doesn't have a clear, integrated plan for resolving both at once.
I hear what James is saying, but with respect, that misses the point entirely. The economic cost of Iranian control of Hormuz is not a one-time event, it's permanent. If Tehran learns that $115 oil protects it from consequences, they will use that leverage every single time there's a confrontation. Every single time. Think about what that means. You've just handed a theocratic regime that wants to dominate the Gulf an economic veto over American foreign policy. That's not strategic patience. That's surrender dressed up in financial language. The Reagan administration didn't flinch when Iran mined international waters in 1988. Operation Praying Mantis destroyed half of Iran's naval fleet in a single day. What happened after that? Years of Iranian restraint in the Gulf. Consequences work. Not heavy firing doesn't.
Here's what I want to know, because both of you are talking about what should have happened or what the right framework is, but we're past that now. The UAE has been attacked. 2 ships are on fire. The ceasefire is wobbling at best and dead at worst. Where does this actually go from here, and what does the next 6 months look like? James, where do you see this going?
The way I see this playing out, and I want to be careful here because there are multiple trajectories, the most likely near-term outcome is an ugly, ambiguous middle ground. Neither full war nor genuine peace. Iran keeps probing below what it calculates is Trump's escalation threshold. The U.S. responds with limited tactical actions, and we get this grinding, dangerous standoff that history tells us is actually more likely to produce a catastrophic miscalculation than either a clear ceasefire or a clear military confrontation. 1 American sailor killed, 1 U.S.-flagged vessel destroyed, and suddenly you're not talking about fast boats, you're talking about a full re-engagement. That risk is real, and it's rising by the day. The uranium timeline running in parallel makes this even more combustible.
Here's what concerns me most, and this is the scenario I think people aren't discussing enough. Iran doesn't need to win a military confrontation. It just needs to survive one long enough to cross the nuclear threshold. Every week of this ambiguous halfway war environment is a week Iran's centrifuges are spinning. The Economist flagged this directly. Trump still has to deal with the uranium. If the trajectory continues where military action is constrained by oil price anxiety and diplomatic face-saving, Iran could emerge from this crisis with Hormuz leverage intact and a nuclear program that's one step closer to weaponization. That's not a worst-case scenario. Based on what we saw Monday, that's the direction we're heading.
Sophia Reeves, James Chen, 2 brilliant, deeply uncomfortable analyses, and I suspect a lot of people in Washington and Abu Dhabi share that discomfort tonight. One thing is absolutely certain. Somewhere in Tehran, someone is watching Trump's ABC News interview very, very carefully, and they're smiling. That's all for this update. Stay informed and stay connected. I'm Emma. We'll be back shortly.